Good day, everyone. We will begin in about 30 seconds. Just want to give everybody the opportunity to log on properly. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us today. My name is Sharon Frankel. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Friends of Tel Aviv University in Montreal. Over the past 2 months, together with our colleagues in Toronto, Tel Aviv University and its friends associations around the globe, we've been offering webinars as a way of staying connected and help keep our minds stimulated and entertained during these challenging times. We've held some excellent webinars, and today will be no exception. Before we begin, I would like to share some of the incredible work done on campus over the past weeks and months. As the pandemic forced people around the world to slow down, Tel Aviv University literally dropped everything to turn its focus on combating the coronavirus. It all started by leading TAU professors at the forefront of some major advances, dropping everything and working with their teams, now comprised of some 120 researchers, 24/7 to find a treatment, a cure, and a vaccine. And their efforts have paid off. Professor Jonathan Gershoni, for example, was awarded a US patent for his innovative vaccine design for the corona family of viruses, and has now partnered with Swiss pharma company Neovy to fast track his development of the COVID-19 vaccine. We're proud of Professor Gershoni, who escalated the work in his lab and is now 2/3 away of developing a vaccine candidate against COVID-19. We're equally proud of Professors Moti Gerlich and Ariel Munitz, who developed a new, quick, and accurate screening method for COVID-19, a new serological test with the initial study focusing right now on IDF soldiers. The test is currently being evaluated by the FDA. The university dropped everything to assist about 6,000 students, Israelis and from around the world, who were left not just unable to continue their studies and pursue their dreams, but unable to work, support themselves, or go back to their home countries, and thus are facing financial and psychological hardships. And last but least, our new president, Professor Ariel Porat, took an unprecedented leadership in his first year in office, initializing 2 extremely important projects as the world prepares for the next phases. Firstly, he's chairing a special task force, which includes the Mossad and Israeli university leaders planning the corona exit strategies for Israelis. And second, Tel Aviv University recently announced the creation of a Center for Combating Pandemics, the first of its kind in Israel and probably in the world. This center will bring Israeli ingenuity to national and global preparedness. But all these projects rely on your support. Mid-May, we launched the international Drop Everything Urgent COVID-19 Appeal, the university's first ever large-scale crowdfunding campaign. We're proud of the leading role TAU is playing, finding solutions to the global battle we now face. Our $2 million campaign, matched dollar for dollar, and thus doubling each gift we receive, is enabling Tel Aviv University to do all it can to fight and understand the horrors of this global pandemic. Please, following today's webinar, drop everything and let's continue to fight COVID-19 together. You can support our campaign at telavivuniversity.crowdchange.net. Your generous support will help to ensure that the extraordinary work being done on campus can and will continue. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today's webinar. Moshe Tzviran is Chaired Professor of Entrepreneurship, Technology, Innovation, and Management, and he's the Dean of the Faculty of Management at Tel Aviv University. He has published over 50 articles in leading academic journals and has co-authored 2 books that serve as key textbooks in IT courses in most of the universities in Israel. Professor Tzviran is leading the entrepreneurship, innovation, and new venture creation ecosystem at the Coller School of Management and has recently been requested to lead this effort campus-wide and turn Tel Aviv University into the leading entrepreneurship university of Israel. On a personal note, I would like to congratulate Professor Tzviran and his entire team for the great work they're doing, especially during this time, and of which we will probably hear a little bit now during the webinar. And I thank you, Professor, for having accepted my invitation to moderate today's webinar. We're honored to have you with us. Professor Tzviran, the screen is yours.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Sharon, it says I cannot. Sharon?
Yes.
You need to tell me on. It says you cannot start your video because you have stopped it.
Now.
Am I good? Okay. Good morning to our Canadian friends and to the USA attendees, and good afternoon to my Israeli fellows, and if we have European guests as well. I'm delighted to be here today and lead the discussion on entrepreneurship and innovation in times of crisis. Now, as a first matter of business, I would like to extend my deepest appreciation and thanks to Sharon Frankel and the Canadian Friends of Tel Aviv University for organizing and orchestrating this event. COVID-19 has certainly made a devastating impact on the world's economy. And in light of this, we would like to discuss the impact of COVID on the world of innovation, entrepreneurship, and new venture creation. Tel Aviv University in general, and the Coller School of Management in particular, are an integral part of the startup nation, and we carry the flag of entrepreneurship and innovation for many years. So when Sharon contacted me a few weeks ago, my immediate reaction was, why not? Let's do it. And before we proceed, I would like to take this opportunity and in a few minutes, tell you in a nutshell about entrepreneurship and innovation at Tel Aviv University as a background and discuss the evolving role of Tel Aviv University in our school in Startup Nation 2.0. Now, I believe you are all familiar with the Startup Nation book, and I know it's a beaten horse, but there is a question that is underlying the discussion, which is Startup Nation is a fact, a historical fact. But the question is whether we're going to have Startup Nation 2.0. Now, if we look at Tel Aviv University's role, or any university actually, like other universities, Tel Aviv is a producer of technological and managerial skills. So basically we have, I would say, 2 avenues. On the one hand, we educate and grow technology agents of entrepreneurship innovation, such as computer scientists, engineers, chemists, and so on and so forth. Those that know the Tel Aviv campus, by the way, this is also recognized as the east wing of the Tel Aviv campus. On the other hand, those alone cannot generate solid startups. They can start an idea, but typically they will need the assistance of managers and facilitators to take it to the next step. And this is what we do on the west side of the campus. Now, you know, let's share some facts. And Tel Aviv University is the only university outside of the US that is among the top 10 universities of growing VC-backed entrepreneurs. And we've been doing it for many years. About 5 years ago, we've been ranked as number 9. Today, we're number 8. And hopefully, in the next few years, we'll find ourselves, and this is my goal personally and the schools, to be among the top 5. Now, by the way, it's not an easy mission. The top 4 are Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, and Harvard, and we are certainly aiming on a top league. Now, we are 8, but just to pay tribute to the higher education system in Israel, Technion is number 14, Hebrew U is 34, and Ben-Gurion closes at top 50 as ranked number 49. And this is definitely saying something about entrepreneurship in Israel. Now, let me switch to our school, to the Coller School of Management. And basically, like every business school, we have many areas, academic disciplines, such as finance and accounting and marketing and so on and so forth. But we do have entrepreneurship and innovation as the flagship of our school, as we believe that we can educate the next generation of entrepreneurs. Now, if you are going to one of the forefathers of the management discipline, Peter Drucker said that entrepreneurship is not a mystique. I personally don't believe that you can train somebody to become an entrepreneur. I think you're either born an entrepreneur and you have the right characteristics or not. But entrepreneurs need to be disciplined even if they have the right genes. And this is exactly what we are doing. We are teaching it, but we are also doing the envelope of activities. So we have an MBA both in Hebrew and in English on entrepreneurship and innovation. We have other activities that wrap up everything. And Tel Aviv University also has its own incubator, CFTAU Ventures, that will take the next ventures to their next stage. So just to give you the flavor, you could see some of the flags of the students in our global MBA program. They come from all over the world. So needless to say, you have the general suspects, but you also have Brazil and China and others as well. I'll talk about, in a few seconds, I'll talk about Eyal, but the Coller Startup Competition was launched 3 years ago. This month, we are running the 4th round with 75 teams that are competing on $100K dollars prize and second prize of $25K. And moreover, they are geared towards the CFTAU Ventures to keep on working on their venture. And so far, we have 6 startups that came from the competition that are already working on their next idea. We have the supplementary activity of Coller Ignite, which is a student club led by the school, but open to all Tel Aviv University students. And we are holding events for all the students to try and get them into the wagon. And we are also producing, we are an academic institute, so we're also producing the Coller Venture Review, which is supposed to be similar to Harvard Business Review or Sloan Management Review, but focusing only on venture and new venture creation with a very distinguished editorial board of faculty from Stanford and Kellogg and Harvard and INSEAD and LBS and so on. This year we have started, we broadened the scope of what we are doing, and basically we are taking responsibility for entrepreneurship activities on campus, and we started a program called CFTAU Up, which is an 18-month entrepreneurship program that goes all the way from teaching to actually working on your startup and taking it to the pitch and the pre-accelerator phase. With this in mind, our school, the Coller School of Management, is ranked number 13. I know 13 is bar mitzvah, but I would like to be more on the top 10. So we have things to do in order to get there. But our MBA is ranked number 13 worldwide in growing VC-backed entrepreneurs. But moreover, we are number 9 in growing unicorns. Now, with all due respect to the tiny state of Israel, and we really think that we are the center of the world, we're a small country, yet we are only second to Silicon Valley in generating unicorn, which is something we should be very proud of. So with this intro, I would like to move into our webinar. And let me introduce our 3 panelists. So the first one is Eyal, Dr. Eyal Binyamin. Sharon, can you turn on his camera? Eyal is basically faculty member at the school, and he leads a variety of activities that I just described, including the Coller competition, the Coller Ignite, and CFTAU Up. He's doing a great job, and he's our first panelist. Our second panelist is Jamie Benizri, a Canadian lawyer by trade, but entrepreneur by heart. He founded Legal Logic, and basically also 2 books, 89 Laws of Entrepreneurship. By the way, Jamie, I'm going to ask you today about the 90s law, so we have things to talk about, and Entrepreneur Inc. And the third one is Adam Shapiro, the youngest participant. Adam is only 22 years old. He's from Montreal, Canada. He is a graduating senior from Cornell University. He founded Startup Nation Mentorship. He worked, while still young, he worked in multiple private equity firms, and he's passionate about ensuring Canada's long-term global competitiveness. And you know, we are after a fierce political battle here in Israel. So I don't know why, but he wants to go into a political office later on. Good luck, Adam, but let's leave it for the future. So guys, let the show begin. And we'll start, you know, I'll try to assign the first questions to a particular individual, and then all the others can join. And by the way, there will be a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any Q&As, just feel free to share them with us. So our focus is entrepreneurship and innovation in times of crisis. And to better focus the discussion, how would you find a crisis? I mean, are there any flavors in crisis? So Eyal, what are your views?
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity to participate on this panel. It's not about my personal point of view. A crisis from the economic perspective is defined by 2 consequent quarters of a down round. So this is from the economic perspective. But if you look at it in a more general perspective, a crisis will be some kind of an event which is very low probability to occur, but at the same time has very high impact on the entity that's in discussion, the organization or the individual, to a level of existential threat. So it has to be something very intense. Usually it comes with a lot of stress in time response, because you don't have enough time to respond. It usually comes along with a lot of uncertainty, lack of resources, and in vast majority of cases, crisis will come with, they will require structures to handle the crisis which are normally not available. So they kick you out of your comfort zone in terms of the structure of your organization or the individual you are in.
Jamie, what are your perspectives?
So my perspective is a lot less fancy and technical than my serial entrepreneur brother at the top of the screen. I view the crisis as a correction, both financial, cultural, and health-wise, in the specific generation that carries the crisis. We give birth to a crisis almost every generation. And if we look back historically, because I've been reading a lot of how did we get into this and how do we get out of this? And if we look back historically, the Great Depression, the dot-com bust, the 2008 financial crisis, and COVID, these had particularities surrounding every single one. This crisis, COVID, is marked by heavily social media carried forward and a lot of memes. And so I think that this is just a correction, as cultural as it is financial.
So you know, Adam, you're the youngest. I think I mentioned it twice today. You're the youngest. You know, Jamie was mentioning the 2001 internet bubble burst and the 2008 financial crisis. You're quite young in both. But on the other hand, Jamie also mentioned the social media, and this is your generation. I mean, we're lagging. With all due respect to Eyal and Jamie still thinks he's young, but we're lagging. So what are you represent the new generation. So what are your views about the crisis? Did it catch you in surprise? And you represent basically the young generation. So go ahead.
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for having me, Moshe, and Tel Aviv University. I'm such a fan of the institution and everything going on at Coller. It's just fascinating. So the dot-com bubble and the financial crisis of 2008, you're right. I was pretty young back then, but I remember them slightly. And they were very impactful on me and the people around me. But today I'd say how I view crises are really unprecedented events that obviously catch people off guard, but create a lot of turbulence and uncertainty. And so I think the period between finding out about that event occurring and figuring out a solution is the crisis, when we don't have the answers and there's a lot of chaos occurring.
You know, I just need to throw a comment. You said that you vaguely remember the internet bubble burst in 2008, and I was wondering whether Jamie vaguely remembers the 1929 crisis. You know, we often discuss innovation and entrepreneurship together, but they are certainly not the same. So, Jamie, let's start with innovation, okay? How is innovation related to the crisis?
You know, in times of crisis, it is the perfect storm to get people out of their comfort zones. Eyal talked about that in his first definition. And so by definition, crises are a great existential time to think about what you do for a living. Does this bring me happiness? And it's when all of these emotions come to the surface, do we have the optimal flow and the optimal conditions for innovation? And so entrepreneurship is required to breed innovation, but not necessarily vice versa. And so because we have the perfect conditions, and because we hear over and over again that we risk losing everything, that we're on the brink of disaster, people are much more prone to get ahead of the curve and innovate on account of their entrepreneurial genes that you said they're born with, and that you at the Coller School are homing in and disciplining so well. And I mean, I wish I did my education with you, because anyone who knows me on this webinar right now knows that I need more discipline, because my thoughts are all over the place. But I think that we create the perfect storm and the perfect conditions for innovation to happen during times of crises, and we've seen them. Look at all of the big companies, anything from Airbnb to Google. They came out of the dust of the crises that we now are in the rear view mirror. So I think that it creates the perfect conditions.
By the way, Jamie, it's never too late, so you're more than welcome to join us.
Thank you.
Okay, Eyal,
Well,
what are your
I think that there are two ways to look at innovation and crisis. So first, one company's or one corporate innovation could actually cause a crisis to another company. So Airbnb that you mentioned, Jamie, could certainly, with their appearance in the market, cause some crisis to many other organizations. So that's one way to look at innovation and crisis. The other way is the other way around, is that a crisis requires a totally different way of thinking in order to get out of the crisis or to handle the crisis as a management, as an individual as well. But as management of a corporate, you have to think differently, because the schemes, the methodologies, the structures that you already have in place will not work. So you have to think out of the box. The thing is that innovation is not something that you can develop at the 89th minute. So let's just for a second, because I'm on the academic chapter here today. So let's define innovation for a minute. So innovation will have to have some thought or concept or product or service, which will have to be new, it has to be useful, and it has to be economically viable. Okay, so those three criteria have to fit in. And in order to think of high level of newness as well as usefulness and to have economic value, to develop this kind of muscle or capability, which on a corporate level, this is a corporate capability that it takes time to master, to build. It's not something that you can do at the second week of COVID-19 going around the markets. Okay, there's something you have to develop way more in advance in order to be able to cope in crisis situations that your organization comes to. So these are the three perspectives. You can generate, your innovation can create crisis to your competition. When crisis comes, your innovation will be the one that will hopefully let you out of it. And the third thing is that innovation has to be developed many years in advance. It's kind of your safety cushion, actually.
Adam?
So generally, I mean, from my limited experience, what I found is that crises are just the most optimal time to think innovatively and create a strategy. And so I can talk about what I've done with Startup Nation mentorship. So this was about 2 years ago. I was a second-year undergraduate student at the time at Cornell University. And I was very dismayed by what I was seeing around me take place with a growing anti-Israel movement on campus, with the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, BDS. And it felt like just so many groups were picking it up, wanting to spearhead it. And what I saw was the vast majority of students around me, however, were totally disenfranchised from the politics of Israel. And that's all they were seeing, really, on both sides. And I said I ought to do something to change that. It just didn't feel right that, you know, over 90% of college students don't want to get into the politics, are more interested in their careers, but all they were seeing was the politics of Israel. And so I said, well, how am I going to change that? I'll pair up, you know, a top student leader with an Israeli executive in any field, whether that's business, technology, government, among others, and we'll fight the BDS movement through creating and fostering powerful relationships. And so what I found is innovation stems, one, you know, through ideas, but also relationships. And essentially the World Jewish Congress, the Israeli Foreign Ministry, they hosted a campus pitch competition that I participated in. And just like you were talking about with Tel Aviv University, bringing together these forums to allow people with entrepreneurial ideas to pursue them, that's what's enabled me to actually get this off the ground, thanks to the World Jewish Congress and others.
Okay, so you know, going along the innovation lines, and again, you're talking, I think you're using innovation and entrepreneurship as kind of a bridge also to Startup Nation and to Israel. Should we, or do you think we should increase or decrease the innovation efforts in times of crisis? Go ahead. I'll save my views to the end. Go ahead.
So I can take a start. I think you know what's interesting is that for the first time in my, I run a traditional law firm in Montreal, Canada, and for the first time in my entrepreneurial history, I'm receiving government funding everywhere for rent, for a working capital, for salaries. I mean, this is unprecedented. And
that's because you don't live in Israel.
Yeah. So I mean, when faced with all of these financial incentives to stay in business, and when we think about the magnitude of the money that's being sprinkled everywhere, you think about, well, you know, maybe the government, in acting as an institutional VC firm, is doing us a favor, and we'll only know later. But the government is essentially, you know, sprinkling money everywhere, hoping that some of it gets stuck on entrepreneurs and on the innovation procedures and bandwagons and schools and everything else that's that creates the ecosystem that makes us innovate. And so from my perspective, the government is acting as the most important VC firm right now in any jurisdiction. And it's a game of numbers, just like Kleiner Perkins or just like anyone else in Silicon Valley. Some will fail, some will succeed. But I think that history has shown us that real winners and unicorns and gems come out of the crises. So I think that the financing efforts of governments, banks, through which it flows, will prove to be fruitful, and that we should continue.
But you know, Jamie, at times of crisis, your initial instinct is to survive. This is true for the human body. It's true for an organization. And the question is, do survival and innovation go together?
I think Eyal has a grin on his face. I think he wants to answer that one, so I'll give him a chance to answer.
Yeah, Jamie, just pass the baton.
There was a TV series many years ago. I don't think Adam saw it at the time. It was called MacGyver, and this guy used to walk around with his Swiss Army knife in his pocket and with a chewing gum in his mouth, and he would like get out of any trouble just using this chewing bubble gum and the Swiss Army knife. I assume that if the series would have run today, it would have been a Leatherman. But anyway, The thing is that it seems as if those two things saved him continuously. But the real thing is that what saved him was his vast knowledge in electronics, in chemistry, in mechanics, and his ability to combine all of those pieces of knowledge in a novel way continuously. And every chapter he would do it in a different manner. I think the same applies for innovation. If you look at innovation as a capability, you have to invest in building this capability. And once crisis faces you in quite a surprising way, this is the time to take out your Swiss Army knife and on your knowledge and your skills and your relationships and your networks, etc., and to put them into action. You don't have to increase innovation levels; just allow it to happen, and just pay back all the investment you have done until that point. That being said, you still have to maintain all the traditional means of crisis management. So you have to have some cash reserves, you have to have some, let's say, double supplier chain, et cetera, et cetera. So you can't neglect all of those other caution issues that you have to address in addressing. And I think that going back to what Adam said, it is some, when going back to implementing innovation at times of crisis, you have to depart yourself from your old mindsets. And the advantage that young people like Adam have on this situation, and they don't have too much legacy to let go. So they just come fresh, and they don't have the pain of letting go of their old beliefs and their old structures. So they just can form the new structure as long as they were trained to be flexible.
Adam, you want to add anything? Everybody's looking at the young generation.
Well, I'll say that what's been most significant for me, in addition to finding an idea to fight a crisis, is finding people who can help me achieve the mission that I'm seeking to solve. And so it's been critical to build a team with people who are, in my opinion, superior to me, better than me, smarter than me, have skills that I don't have, and also have different perspectives than me, different political beliefs from different countries, backgrounds. And I think if you look at the team that I've created, we're over 30 people now running Startup Nation Mentorship. And it's really an interesting group of people. And we're all very young, of course. Vast majority of us are college students who, it's a nonprofit. We're all volunteering towards a common mission. But we always say that we run like a business. And so even though it's a nonprofit per se, we really try to take inspiration from the private sector and emulate the top companies that we think are making the difference. And I'll also just add that another thing sometimes that I've seen from people who are starting new ventures is they try to be different and close off other opinions and just other things that are happening in their space. So for example, there's a lot of people doing interesting initiatives in the pro-Israel campus world. And some people will say, I'm different. I don't want to be like the others. But really, when I saw at Harvard, there's a student, if you don't know him, you should look up this movement, the Israel Summit movement. It started at Harvard by a student who's just graduating named Max August. And he brought together some of the most influential speakers from all different sectors. Amari Stoudemire, an NBA All-Star player, Eli Tahari, a world famous Israeli fashion designer, brought them to campus to expose students that ultimately, Israel can impact them in a way that cannot be done just through buzzwords like saying, Israel, they created the cherry tomato. And I think by looking at others who have been innovating, has allowed me to then say, why don't I get the heads of Apple, Goldman Sachs, and Google in Israel and connect them with top college students. We're now on 18 campuses in 6 countries. And we just started this 2 years ago with a couple of students. And so it's been really just by observing what successful people have done and taking their cues.
Okay, now Eyal and Jamie, I'm not going to let you off the hook very quick. You both mentioned Airbnb, who were definitely disruptive to the hospitality services and so on and so forth. And they are struggling now. And the model doesn't work in times of such a crisis. And the question is, and you know, they can serve as an example. The question is, looking at such an organization, you know, Zoom is on the other end of the spectrum. But if you look at Airbnb, do they really have the energy now at times of crisis to invest in entrepreneurship, or they put all their efforts in laying off people? You're muted, Jamie.
Yeah, my dog was barking, so I didn't want it to interfere with Adam.
Okay.
When we look at, we can look at Airbnb, we can look at huge companies like WeWork that have become ghost towns around the world. And we think to ourselves, how are, you know, they're already, most of these companies have never even attained profitability. Will they ever hit profitability? And this will probably delay. But I think that when we look at the housing market as a whole, and we look at all the fundamentals of what makes the economy go round, as an attorney, I still see people renting out Airbnbs. I still see people acquiring buildings and using Airbnb as a conduit to get renters. So as someone who's also on the ground in Montreal and Canada and in the US as well, I still see the activity, and people, they were so strong in marketing. They had so much momentum prior to COVID that I think that they will be able to carry forward in their name, in their scale, in their scope, and in their influence to come out of this okay. Because people are going to be looking to them for solutions and for alternative ways of renting and organizing their rentals after this is done. So I think that, yes, they need to have an Eyal who's much more structured and has the methodology around how they need to maybe create a new venture wing or a COVID crisis unit to respond to what's happening. But I think that they will be able to weather the storm. I see it happening. And one of the things that I see, I've interviewed dozens of people during COVID, and I created an interview series called Entrepreneurs in Quarantine. I grew my beard for more credibility. And what I learned is that, you know, it's the companies who stay the course. The companies who don't necessarily pivot because pivoting is cool and pivoting is trendy, that will stand the test of time, earn their customers' respect as well as the respect of the economy, and come out of this as true leaders. So sometimes the best move is not to pivot, to be comfortable and to be confident in your business model when it comes out on the other side.
So, you know, let's shift the discussion to entrepreneurship. And, you know, I'll even split it into two, into entrepreneurship and startups on the one hand, and intrapreneurship and corporations on the other hand. So, and I'll try to discuss them separately. So I've looked at some recent articles, which I would like to share with you some of the findings. And I must admit, they carry contradicting messages. So on the one hand, the Israeli Innovation Authority, together with the Israeli Advanced Technology Industries Organization, have conducted a survey just last week among more than 400 startup companies in Israel to realize, one, that 20% of the startups are at risk of closure within the next 3 months. Most of the young companies that employ less than 10 employees are expected to close within the next 6 months. Sales volumes in those that already sell has dropped significantly by the volume of probably about 25% and 25 to 50. And moreover, which is alarming, 50% of the investors, including VCs, they said that they either stopped investing or they slowed down dramatically. These are the facts from the survey. Now, on the other hand, JVP, standing for Jerusalem Venture Partners, just announced yesterday that they raised more than $200 million for the companies in their portfolio. So you have, you know, you can play with each of them in two different ways. But, you know, Jamie, you authored 29 laws of entrepreneurship, right? So let's hit for the next law. What are your views of the current crisis on entrepreneurship and startups? And are you going to expand your book to 90 laws and add one U to the law of entrepreneurship in crisis?
I will. It would be an honor to add a law in honor of the Coller School of Management. So yes, I will.
It's a Coller law.
The Coller law. I think that what we're seeing in this time is the ultimate litmus test. It's the ultimate test of who will survive. And you know, Adam knows very well that if you want to be a cool entrepreneur, you rent a Ferrari, you rent a yacht, you take some pictures on Instagram and you show everybody how well you're doing. I think it's times like this that will compress everybody, force the strongest to survive and come to the surface. And so I really think that because we're in a survival of the fittest, the strongest will survive. I think that the adage that we learned from the theories elaborated in the Lean Startup and E-Myth are fail fast. And because we have such a compressed vacuum of people failing fast and needing to make quick decisions, what we see is that the winners, the losers will be displaced, the winners will be there, and I think those are the ones that will get funding. It's much easier to identify winners and losers in a time of crisis, and that will be my 90th law, ladies and gentlemen.
Moshe, if I may go back and react to Jamie's 90th law, but I have to start with your previous question and maybe at least expand the Airbnb and WeWork examples on what happened. Yes, I agree with Jamie. I think that those that did not get into this crisis in a fit way will not survive. That being said, you just mentioned that 20% will not survive 3 months and 30% will not, of startups will not survive 6 months. I think that this is the regular situation in the startup market. I mean, at every given moment, 20% of them will not survive. We know for a fact that only 90% or 95% of startups hit it to success. Any number between 90 to 95% of them were going to fail anyway in the next few years. So I assume that 20% of them being on the edge of shutting down is quite a realistic number, even not in Corona times. That's one thing. And the second thing is that we know that, I think that Jamie knows this better than me, that there are the 3 T's of investors, of the VCs. So we have the team, and the team. So those are the 3 most important things for investors. There are the 3 L's of founders, of startup founders, okay? Now, this is a great secret. So please, all of you participants, there are about almost 50 people here, please don't share this with other people, okay? The 3 L's of entrepreneurship, successful entrepreneurships are luck, luck, and luck. If you're lucky and lucky and lucky, so you're going to make it. That being said, I can't say this as an academic because if it's all about luck, so why do we have the Coller School of Business for? I mean, why do we run all of these?
We teach luck.
We practice luck. We sit down and flip a coin continuously until it gets continuous series of heads. This is why I have so many coins here at my desk. So we flip them. This is my teaching accessories. Now, the thing is that surprisingly enough, there was a guy named Richard Wiseman, and he is a psychologist, and he decided to investigate this thing about luck. And he wrote an amazing book that's called The Luck Factor, and he reverse engineered luck. Okay, and apparently what he did was very simple, okay, when you come to think about it. He took a lot of lucky people, many lucky people, as many as he can, and he separated them from the non-lucky people, and he tried to find patterns in their behavior. Okay, I will not tell you the factors, but there are actually 4 + 1, actually 5 factors that if you follow them, you will be more lucky in your life. Okay, and I think that entrepreneurs, if they follow those, and it's part of the book. Okay, it's not just part of the luck book, it's part of the entrepreneurship book and the guidelines we teach entrepreneurs of how to be more successful. And when we talk about being, Jamie mentioned being the strongest or the fittest, I would prefer to use fit more than strong, because if you can fit yourself to your changing environment and in a situation that you have very little oxygen around you, you can hibernate and live on very small amounts of oxygen. then you are fit with your environment. And once the oxygen will be available again, then you start running again and start moving. It's not necessarily about strength. It's more about your ability to change or to morph yourself to the current conditions. And if we take that, we understand that entrepreneurs, and one of the things that, by the way, Richard Weissman mentions is the ability to feel small signals, to sense very tiny signals and to tap on them. I think that some entrepreneurs, no one could have anticipated COVID-19, okay? And unless you were reading the Chinese newspapers in Wuhan daily, okay? So it's not something you could have been ready. But you can sense that your bank account is drying up pretty fast. So you should have left yourself as a founder with a much higher cash reserve. Talking about luck, most of those startups in the 50% that Moshe did not mention were lucky enough to close an investment round maybe a month or 2 or 3 months before. And if they're smart enough, they would close an investment round that will take them at least to the next significant milestone. And these are things that you can learn. You can learn how to manage your cash flow, not from a managerial point of view, from an entrepreneurial point of view. This is a totally different cash flow management issue. Okay? And you know what? Entrepreneurs can very easily, unlike corporate executives, can very easily go back to live in their parents' apartment, living on pizza and their mother's kitchen. Okay? I have one of them on my top floor here. Okay? So they can do it very easily. So they can reduce their fixed costs dramatically. And they could give some more options to the top employees and the top executives. And for those options, for the dream of being a successful founder, being on the newspapers of maybe a year or 2 years from now on the front page with a beautiful unicorn exit, they will be able to hibernate and go through this period of time. Okay, so I think that not so many of those, Moshe, will die so fast. And I do appreciate the IATI survey.
Okay, so yeah, I have another question. I'm taking it to another extreme. We're in the middle of a crisis now. That's, there are very few people who think that the crisis is behind us, but eventually we're in the middle of the crisis, or maybe even just in the beginning. We don't really know. We know nothing about this. But is it now the right time to start a venture? Not to survive, to start a venture. Or, give your advice to Adam. He's ready to work on a venture.
I am sure this is the best time. I'm sure this is the best time, and for several reasons. I don't know if Adam and Jamie would agree with me, but this is the best time to launch a venture. A, you're unemployed anyway, so why not just launch a venture now? B, most of your friends and the talents are unemployed anyway, or at least had a major cutback in the salaries. Third, the government is going to help you. They help Jamie, right? So they're going to help everyone. So you have more money from the government to stay home and work on your venture. You have more runway to build your venture. Okay, there are way more opportunities now in the market. And the last thing we know for sure, well, maybe Adam has not experienced that yet. We know that the world goes in cycles. So we're in a downtime now. It'll come up eventually. Few months, we don't know exactly when. But if we will be able to take this runway and build our venture where the economy is down, when the economy is going to come up, we will be there with the products, with the services, with the team. We will be able to come to reach the first seed of rounding, the first seed round with a much better product, with some amount of traction that will give us a much higher valuation, and there's going to be a lot of money in the market then. There's not too much money available now. So now is the best time. You have about a year, most probably a year and a half of runway to build your venture with the best teams, find the best opportunities. This is what I think.
I love your optimism, and Jamie and Adam are nodding in agreement, but do you guys want to add something to this optimism? You can make it even better.
Sure, I'll jump in here. So I definitely agree with Eyal. I feel like right now is an amazing time for smart and passionate and motivated people to come together and utilize what's in front of us, which is the time, the biggest thing, and just the availability of people to get on board new initiatives, and the availability of government and institutions to help really fund and foster a powerful environment to create new ventures. what I'll say on the survival front is, famed investor Carl Icahn is really well known for saying that, most companies have awful management teams, right? And so I think what I've seen as a college student is that most organizations, most initiatives and ventures, even on campus, just the management teams aren't great. And it's not because the founders aren't great, but it's because succession plans have not properly been executed. And so that's one of the reasons why, with everything that I've done, it's been so important, especially now during the COVID time when we're in kind of survival mode. Who knows, are we going to be back on campus? Will it be the fall? Will it be next winter, the following fall? No one really knows, but we still have to continue to operate the mentorship we run. We have to continue to plan ahead. And so during this time, in addition to finishing up my studies, it's been so important to put together a succession team with a new CEO, a new chief operating officer, and really just make sure that the venture that I started will continue, in 10 years and in 20 years. And I know that one of the other reasons why it will continue is because Tel Aviv University is a force to be reckoned with. And I'm so fortunate to be, working with Tel Aviv University and its amazing alumni from all the different schools, especially the Coller School. And I think unlike anywhere else, I've just been amazed at how in Israel, its entrepreneurs and its workers are just so willing to help people like me who reach out to them, even during the coronavirus pandemic, who've said, can you spend an hour mentoring this student from Stanford or Yale? And not an issue, even though we're dealing with a pandemic, they're still committed. And I think Israel's a testament to really societies around the world.
Before we proceed, I have two more questions. If anybody from the audience has a question, please send it to me and I'll route it to our participants. We have around 10 minutes. So this is the time to share your questions with us. Now, a few issues that I saved to the end. First of all, we discussed, and we're going to beat this, it's not a dead horse, but it's definitely a beaten horse. Airbnb again as an example. But definitely at the time of crisis, many organizations face shrinking of revenues. And therefore, the question is, in a survival mode, whether to invest in entrepreneurship and or innovation, and should they do it now or wait to later times? And the question is, if you are the CEO of such a company, what would you do? Should I mention Hertz or Airbnb? I can have a few ones.
There's a couple of interesting things. I'll pick up on Eyal and Adam's last comments. People are scared. People are fed up of opening the news and just hearing terrible stories of senior residences where people are dying. They're sick of not knowing when they're going to see their families. People now more than ever need hope. And what I noticed is that there's a balance to be had. And I think a lot of it depends on your budget and whether or not you're financially strong enough to invest in innovation during this time. Like Eyal said, can you open the taps that you've been training for all these years to finally implement the innovation war chest that you've been creating and building? But the most important investment that an organization can do today is in its leadership. And in going with Adam said about the shitty management that exists all over the world, and taking what Eyal said about the most important thing, which are the 3 T's, team, 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 it's so important now more than ever for leaders to spend time with every department, person, supervisor, because there's going to be a bond created at the end of all this. People will come out of this as a feeling of having survived a common war, a common threat. And so a leader who can tap into that, a leader who can be there and reinforce that we're going to be okay, we're going to be stronger as a group, can keep banging on the drums, go on social media and address your audience. I think those are going to be the real winners, because they are going to have the loyalty, the respect, and the motivation that their staff are looking for.
I must agree with Jamie, and I find myself surprisingly agreeing with the lawyer too, way more than I'm used to. It's not something that's so common here with me. That I think, Moshe, referring to your question and taking on Jamie's answer, that if I'm the CEO of a company that has suffered severely, the question is, do I have a culture innovation in my company already? Because if I do, if the company already has embraced a culture of innovation, I don't have to do much, because the people will, the employees, the workers, they will come to me with ideas. They will come with, we found this, we had that, we thought about this, we have solved that problem, we know what to do. Okay, and this is the team thing. If you have an innovative team or a culture innovation embedded within your team, there is less that you need to do as a CEO or a top management team. It'll most probably happen spontaneously within the company, because people will sense and people know how to do. They will have their Swiss Army knife, they'll have their bubble gums, and they will know how to solve the things in their particular departments, assuming that you got prepared to that situation.
2001, 2008, 2020, let's assume, and I have no clue about the cycle, but let's assume that next decade we're going to have another crisis. Hopefully not this one, okay? Can corporates plan now towards the next one? What do they need to do?
You're so optimistic. The next decade. Just to give you you have a list of all the crises. I'm not so sure about the let's say academic validity, but if you look in Wikipedia, you have a list of all the crises. In the 19th century, we had about 10 significant economic crises. At the 20th century, we had about 16, and now in the 21st, we already had more than that. So, and we were only in the second decade. So most probably we'll have many more crises coming in and an increasing pace. So this is one thing that's gonna most probably happen. I don't know when.
We have a question. We have a question from the audience. If you had to provide a list of the most important entrepreneurial recommendations, what would they be? With regard to the COVID time.
Tips for entrepreneurs?
Yes. Entrepreneurs at the time of crisis.
So I guess the lawyer will say something. If I've learned...
Probably get a lawyer.
Yes, you should get a lawyer, but what I've known, I mean, I created a show during COVID to answer people's questions. Should I go bankrupt? Do I pay my landlord? Is my lease still valid? I brought in accountants and trustees and entrepreneurs. And the one thing that I found shocking, but that we all know it's intuitive, is that business really hasn't changed since the Great Depression. Why? Because instead of creating a new platform, creating a new app, the most successful entrepreneurs that were weathering the storm were the ones who were picking up the phone, calling their clients, calling their landlords, calling their suppliers, going to see them, reorganizing, restructuring. They were just doing things that my grandfather would have done to save his manufacturing facility 60 years ago. And it's the most simple advice, but when you're there for your clients, when you call, and there was a dentist that I interviewed who called every single patient to let them know that they will be reopening and they can call them if he has any questions. And that was the simplest and yet the most effective advice, because the people who got into trouble, my clients who picked fights with their landlord to say, you know what, we should all suffer together and I'm not going to pay you rent. Those are the people whose relationships are being damaged. And so if you're proactive, if you're vulnerable, And you show your landlords that here are my figures. Here's what I'm trying to do to stay in business. Vulnerability is a great skill set to have to show that, you know, you're suffering like everybody else, but that you're willing to be proactive. You're not hiding behind your obligations. And so my advice is pick up the phone, stop innovating, stop investing, and work on the relationships that were there for you, that gave you your first chance. The first landlord that let you sign your lease, your first employee that believed in you. Stop trying to pivot and do fancy things and do Instagram stories. Spend time with your people, because that's ultimately what's going to save you.
Any concluding remarks, guy? Eyal or Adam?
I find myself totally agreeing with Jamie again. Maintaining your values in times of crisis is one of the most important things that you should do. You should heavily invest in maintaining your and preserving your values in your everyday behavior, even at the worst times, especially in times of crisis. But if I take this question and try to look at it from, let's say, a crisis point of view, if you're an entrepreneur that you're trapped in a situation of crisis and you don't know exactly what you do what you do best, but try to find maybe another place to do it. And we have several examples here of startups that were doing one thing at once. They were using their AI algorithms for doing one thing, and then the COVID-19 came, so that thing was not relevant anywhere. So they were actually thinking, okay, this is what we know can do best. Where can we do it elsewhere, which is relevant now, and change their market segment that they were addressing. Okay. This is one thing. In terms of what to do, like a general idea or general recommendation for entrepreneurs is heavily invest in learning what entrepreneurship is and how to professionally execute entrepreneurship. This is the one thing that is very, very hard to learn, because entrepreneurship is the art and science of new venture creation, or of the creation of new economical entity. It's not something that's simple to do. That it's not just you hang a new sign of a new business on the front of your new rented office or shop, and that's it. You have your new business owner. It's way more complicated than that. So take the time to learn, do internships, do all kinds of things that will build the knowledge of how to be successful and get out of the failure statistics of new ventures.
Well, we are basically running out of time, and two things. First of all, I got a comment from Dean Mayer, who asks, what makes Israel such a central figure for global entrepreneurship, and more specifically, what makes Israeli entrepreneurs often stand out among others? Now, I don't expect you guys to respond to it, but rather I pass the baton to Sharon. Sharon, you can arrange another webinar on this topic, because there are tons of things to say about it, not in a nutshell, but rather, I'd say at least in an hour. I have a presentation. That's number one. Number two, before I really pass the baton to you, and there are additional questions, but I'm looking at the clock as well. First of all, it has been a pleasure. So thank you, Sharon, again for making it happen. Thank you, my dear panelists, Eyal Binyamin, Jamie Ben-Ezri, and Adam Shapiro. You've been amazing. You know, time flies when you enjoy, and I've realized that it's past 7 here now. So Sharon, concluding remarks are yours, and go ahead.
So first of all, thank you from my end as well. I knew that when I reached out to you that we will have a dynamic and fun panel, yet looking at the serious side of things. But you surpassed it. I really have to say you surpassed my expectations. I truly, truly hope that we can have a 2.0 real in-person event very soon in Montreal, have you all together here. Just to comment what you just said, Dean Zviran, if anybody wants to email me questions, sharon@cftau.ca. I would be happy to forward them to the panelists. I'm sure everybody would agree and be willing to respond. We would love to keep the conversation going. On my end, I actually just wanted to add one more word to the luck, and team that Eyal said, and I think it's a chutzpah. I think that we definitely have to step up, think out of the box. I think that a lot what you said today about individuals and organizations can be mirrored and applied directly to Tel Aviv University, not only how they responded immediately to the crisis and the lockdowns and the breakout when it happened, moving within 24 to 48 hours online, not one single class was lost. Not one single student of our 30,000 student body has missed one single class when we switched from online, which I think is unheard of and just speaks for the school, but also represents the Coller School and Dean Zviran and his team and the students. I think you are paving the road to everything that you have said over the last hour, everything that is needed in startup and innovation. You guys are paving the road. I am proud to represent the university in Canada. I'm proud to have partners like you and supporters like Jamie and Adam. Thank you, everyone. Keep safe. Everybody should have a good re-entry to hopefully normal life as soon as possible. And we look forward to another session. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And as we say, à bientôt. Shalom.
Thank you very much.